anime cat girls. Chat, do y'all still have a body? Why am I exploding?
Development of technology that allows people to, transition more effectively, if you like, and to pass more as the other sex and so on, that sort of opened this up. And because of that, we're now
Is he saying that like the invention of HRT made it possible for like transsexual people to exist? I mean, on like a fundamental level, I guess that's true, but that you could trace that back all the way to like the 1930s, back in Germany, in the Weimar Republic, when medical transition was first invented and was first tested on like trans people in Dr. Hirschfeld's lab. The invention of HRT creating like trans people. I mean, I guess you could say it creates people who are transsexual, but that's because transsexual people are people who take HRT. It's like a circular thing.
other people go, well, it's the academics in the 60s. And where do you think this comes from?
I think like all really interesting and strange phenomena, it's a perfect storm. Like a lot of things arrived at the same point together. I think there probably have always been people who have thought that they would like to be the opposite sex or that they were meant to be the opposite sex.
Yep, that's true. We have histories, anthropologies of trans people dating back thousands of years. As long as we have anthropologies of humans, we have anthropologies of trans people. There's even a Roman empress who's trans, Eligabus. You can look up her life and her history. She was famous for offering like any amount of money to somebody who could perform bottom surgery, thousands of years ago. There were no doctors that were able to, but it's a pretty funny story.
And we used to know, until we'd forgotten, like how that worked out, like how that happened.
We used to know how that happened, but now we don't. We used to know what made people trans. Please tell me, what made them trans?
And so, in the 70s and 80s, there were these prospective studies where they identified little boys who said ardently that they thought they were meant to be little girls. And they followed them into adulthood, and what they were was gay. Very strong link between being really highly gender non-conforming in childhood, early childhood.
Oh, is she talking about the persistence-desistance studies? Okay, yeah. What these studies actually did, it's not that they found little boys who said that they were girls. What they did is they found little boys who had any kind of gender incongruence. So essentially, they might have expressed gender non-conforming behavior. They might have been trans. Trans people were like a very small portion of this group. But essentially what they found is that out of the entire group of gender non-conforming people, most of them were just gender non-conforming. And there was a small portion of them that were trans. But the portion who was trans and who was diagnosed with gender dysphoria tended to overwhelmingly persist in being trans. But meanwhile, for people who were just gender nonconforming, did not have a gender dysphoria diagnosis, they tended to just grow up to be gender nonconforming and be happy with that. And most of the gender nonconforming boys were also gay. It's kind of it's a conflation of two different populations, which is what she's abusing here, when she's abusing the statistics in that way.
So those kids, they look around them. They're not born thinking I was meant to be a girl or I was meant to be a boy. They look around them and they think, why am I so different? Why are people treating me like this? Why do I not fit in? Why does my dad drag me out to rugby matches and grab my Barbie doll away from me or whatever, So those kids, they learn from the society that they're in that they should have been the opposite sex. There's always been that.
There's always been that. I mean, if you were to go back like long enough throughout human history, a lot of early human societies were more gender equitable than a lot of modern societies are. So I don't know if you can like say that that's always true. The idea that like environment is going to influence how you understand like and express your gender, that's absolutely true. Like the ways that we have taught people to suppress gender nonconformity, or even like to suppress being gay for decades. Yeah, this is a well-known social phenomenon. It's the same thing with like the left-handedness, where when we demonize left-handedness, people were less likely to be left-handed.
So some of those kids just grow up and they work out they're gay and that's fine. I mean, I should say it's not all that they're gay, but anyway, it's just like strong statistical link.
What about the kids that are like actually trans? They're not gender nonconforming gay boys. What do we do about them? Like the thing that she's saying is that most gender nonconforming people are just like gay boys. Okay, sure, that's fine. But what about the kids who are genuinely trans? Like that's a different group of people. What do we do about them? How do we understand them? I don't think she has an answer for that.
So there was always that, and then along came medical technology that allowed, some surgeries and so on, quite brutal surgeries and not terribly effective still.
This claim about brutal surgeries you can make about literally any surgery that's ever been done. Have you ever seen pictures of literally any, open heart surgery would be quite an example to look at, but like surgery is bloody and messy, and this is true for any surgery. You could do this exact same fear-mongering over anything.
But anyway, those surgeries started. Then I do think the academics had something to do with it. There's this whole
what the academics had to do with it? They like studied trans people and studied their outcomes with like hormonal interventions and surgery. And they found that for people who are genuinely trans, medical transition profoundly improves their mental health and overall well-being because it's a different population than the gender nonconforming gay boys.
Postmodernism, what they call the postmodern turn.
Wait. Now we're blaming trans people on postmodernism? Does she even know what postmodernism means?
Stop thinking that words describe reality and you start thinking that words create reality.
That's not what postmodernism means. Okay, broadly speaking, it would be more about the idea that, like, we can have, like, words and we can think of, like, generalities for how these words are used. The whole world is always going to be more nuanced, and it's not going to fit a single clean narrative that's going to accurately describe everybody. So she's misrepresenting postmodernism, and also, like, she's trying to, at the same time, she's rejecting it when she's coming up with this universal narrative of, like, people that have gender incongruence are all just, like, gay boys that are gender nonconforming. When this actually proves the postmodern point, because in addition to that general case, there are also trans people. I don't know if she's just dumb or if she's grifting.
Words do create reality. They start wars. They make things happen, but they also describe reality. I can't just say any word means what I like.
Wait, so now she's saying that this is a result of postmodernism, but postmodernism is also true, or are her bad representation of postmodernism? What?
And still live in a world where trains run and operations are successful and that sort of thing. So the postmodern turn is like moving away from the reality and towards the words. And then they just get like kind of intoxicated on it and unmoored from anything. And then along comes the internet.
Move away from the reality and towards the words. I don't even know what that means at this point. That's not postmodernism. That's just like, I don't like it when people change the meaning of words, I guess? Like, as scientists understand new things about the world and change the meaning of words, I don't like that. Words change meaning all the time as, like, culture evolves, as, like, we gain a deeper understanding of something. We had to change the definition of gravity when we discovered Einstein's theory of relativity. And so as we understand more about gender and about how people express that, then yeah, it would make sense that we have changing meanings of gender. I mean, gender roles have been changing meaning constantly throughout all of human history and culture. It used to be the case that blue was the girl's color and pink was the boy's color, but that flip-flopped. Yeah, of course gender's meaning changes all the time.
And I would say that's the last of the pieces I would pick out, that, in an internet world, in an online world, you forget that you're actually a physical being very easily.
I don't think I've ever had that happen. I know that I'm a physical human, but I can also type on the computer and be an internet person. I don't experience that problem. Is this like a boomer thing?
You live through your avatar, you see people on screens, you're not doing manual labor.
Chat, do y'all still have a body? Like, what happened? Are y'all been on the internet? Where's your bodies? Yeah, plug me into the computer already.
We've delayed childbearing. People have fewer children. Lots of people have no children.
So now we're talking about the birth rates? How do we get from trans people exist to the birth rates are declining? How did we get there?
You just can actually pretend much more successfully that men and women are just more similar than they are.
So I think it is factually true that men and women are more similar than, like, most conservatives think they are. If we're talking about, like, biological differences between, like, males and females, there's a lot of ways that we're more similar than most people, and especially most conservatives think. Like, for example, the fact that all human beings have mammary glands and are capable of lactation. Like, that's an example of, oh, we're actually a lot closer than most people would think. I really don't get where she's going with this.
Yeah, I mean, that's not all of it by any means. Buy the book if you want to know the whole story. But, those are the bits I'd pick out to get...
Oh, she published a transphobic book. That's what this is? Okay.
Just where we are, where we say that there's no difference between men and women, or that men and women are arbitrary categories that we can redefine as we wish.
She's definitely doing a conflation of sex and gender here. But when people say that, like, men and women are arbitrary categories, what they're referring to is, like, the social construct of gender is pretty arbitrary. Why do we say that, like, short hair is a boy thing and long hair is a girl thing? Or why do we say that blue is a boy thing or pink is a girl thing? There are certainly aspects of gender that are entirely arbitrary and have nothing to do with biology. And also, like, if we're going to recognize that even our classification system of biology has a degree of arbitrarity in like what we prioritize over other characteristics. Like, for example, we could say that what makes somebody biologically male would be like XY chromosomes and then XX chromosomes biologically female. Or we could say it's based off your reproductive capacity. Or we could say it's based off of the hormones in your body. There's lots of different characteristics which are sexually dimorphic. Those characteristics, those are going to exist outside of human influence. By the time we start saying this characteristic matters more than this characteristic, and this characteristic is what determines whether or not you're male or female, there is arbitrary social influence in how we categorize male and female. I mean, you can imagine one biologist say that we can separate people by chromosomes, while another biologist would say that we could separate people by hormones. And while they would get mostly the same results, there would be cases of people who are like XY, but they have Swyer syndrome and they actually have female anatomy. And so they would have like female hormones, but they would have like male chromosomes. And so the difference between these two scientists' modeling system would result in some people being classified in different ways. And which modeling system we go with is going to be influenced by some social standards or arbitrary decision.
No difference between men and women, or that men and women are arbitrary categories that we can redefine as we wish.
But Helen, there's also as well several strands to this, because the people, or normally men who transition later on in life, are very different, like we say, to young boys who want to transition, but also the young girls who will then want to transition to be boys. That's a completely different thing entirely as well, isn't it?
Wait, are you telling me that there are differences between trans men and trans women? After she just said that men and women are different, that there are differences between trans men and trans women? Who would have thought that that's different?
Men and women are different, and their motivations for wanting to be the opposite sex are very different too. And then sexuality.
Please explain why the motivations are drastically different, because I think that the difference is just like they want to be the other gender and or they want to be the other sex, and so they'll take steps to make that happen or to transition the ways that they can. That seems to be the same reason in both cases.
Realities are different. Most people are straight, a few people are gay, some people are, you know, on a spectrum of bisexuality in between. So those people are going to have different motivations as well. And you see, it's funny how
there are generally differences between people who are straight versus gay versus bi. That is true, but I don't see how that would give you a completely different motivation to transition.
you see the differences between men and women more clearly when you look at men and women who don't want to be men and women. So, I mean, by and large, the women who transition are lesbian, if they're adults, or they're teenage girls who are going through adolescence and finding it tough. Adolescence always is tough.
Is that even true? I thought that for like trans people, it's a pretty widespread of like the sexualities of trans people. Let's see if we can find statistics on that. Okay, let's just get the Trans Survey 2015 report. You can find it in there. Okay, so trans women are in the dark gray. Trans men are in the light gray. So trans women, 6% asexual, 20% bisexual, 27% lesbian, 16% pansexual, 6% queer, 19% straight. Yeah, this is more like the data that I've typically seen, where trans people's sexualities tend to be like very spread out. And then for trans men, 23% straight, 24% queer, 17% pan, 12% gay, 12% bi, 7% asexual. That's really interesting. 17% of non-binary people identify as asexual. That's fascinating. I totally believe that. But no, her data saying that like trans men are all just lesbians, that would be like the straight category. That's 23%. It's not even a quarter of the data. Yeah, I think she's going off of like really old data there.
For girls, you know, there's a whole, you know, it's earlier than it used to be. You may be 11 when men start gawping at your tits, and you know, it's not very...
That's always been true, that like AFAB people start puberty younger.
Very pleasant, and you think life would be easier as a boy. And then you look online and you say, why do I feel so uncomfortable with my body? Why do I feel uncomfortable being me? And the answer you'll get is trans.
No. If you just say I'm uncomfortable with my body, people aren't just gonna immediately jump to like, you're trans. If you say like, I really wish I was a boy, and like throughout my entire life I've known and wished that I was a boy, then people might say, yeah, it sounds like you might be trans. But if you just say I'm uncomfortable with my body, I don't think people are gonna jump to the first thing is you're trans. Also, like, men looking at your boobs at 11 years old, that does not make you trans. That would certainly make you uncomfortable or like creeped out with men, but that doesn't mean that you want to like be a man. I mean, most people that have those experiences are like, men are disgusting and I don't like the way they treat. Not, wow, I wish I could be the one that looks at 11-year-olds' boobs. Like, that's not what happens. That's really not what happens.
No, that wasn't true 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you got better advice. But now the advice is if you think you may be trans, you probably are.
Well, that's quite a goalpost shift. So she shifted the goalpost from, I am experiencing discomfort with my body, you're probably trans, to if you think you might be trans, you probably are trans. And that's actually a pretty fair thing. Like, if you're really considering whether or not you're trans, most cis people are pretty certain in their identity and don't have those kind of questioning. Like, obviously it's a good idea to get, like, you know, talking to a gender therapist if you are having doubts. But, like, generally, cis people don't spend that much time questioning their gender identity.
So that's that bunch. And then the little boys, yeah. I mean, they're very effeminate little boys, and there's still a lot of homophobia out there. You know, there really are people who look at a little boy in a dress who says that his favourite toy is a Barbie doll. And
she's also trying to characterize all, like, the trans people as just, like, boys who are attracted to boys, or trans women as, like, people who would be attracted to men. That would be the straight trans women. which 19% of the sample, yeah, you know, like her claims about like sexuality and gender identity literally don't even fit like the modern day population of trans people. Like the data she's working off of is so old.
And then the adult men, I mean, you know, the fact is probably 3 to 5% of men are erotic cross-dressers. Like we knew that, you know, those surveys were done before this.
3 to 5%? Is that legit? That's completely different than being trans, but is there actually data on that? According to the DSM-5, fewer than 3% of males have reported being sexually aroused by dressing in women's clothes. Okay, so the DSM-5 says that less than 3% have ever reported being sexually aroused by cross-dressing. And now she's saying it's 3 to 5%. Maybe she's working on some older data, or maybe men are just like a lot kinkier and effeminate than they want to admit. But I don't see how that's the same thing as like being trans.
Latest pretends that men can be women.
Yeah, that would depend on her definition of like an erotic crossdresser. Because like I'm guessing that she would be the type to say that like all trans people are just like erotic crossdressers, or at least all trans women. And so if you're like conflating crossdressers and trans women, then maybe you could get up to like 3%. Is how I really don't know.
They find this an erotic idea, to be a woman, to inhabit the role of a woman. You know, you would have kept that at the weekend and cross-dressing parties. Maybe, you know, between you and your wife.
Well, I mean, if it is just a kink, then yeah, you would probably keep it just in the bedroom. But if it's not just a kink, if it's like actually the way that you want to live your life every day, not a costume that you take off, that would make you like a trans person. Like it's really clear what the difference between just a kink and like a trans person is that one person fully lives their life living as the other gender. I mean, if the entire thing was like sexual, like that'd be pretty uncomfortable to be like put into like a kink situation 24/7. Like, people that just cross-dress as a kink, they don't want to be trans. Like, they're just different types of people.
20 years ago. Now you're stunning and brave, and out that lady comes, and you get... Oh,
that's another good point. She said that they're all just, like, gay men, but why would they have, like, a cross-dressing kink in their, like, straight marriage? Her own narrative contradicted herself.
Societal plaudits for what is actually just an erotic interest.
So are you saying that that some men, or a lot of men who transition later...
She also just implied that people are, like, applauded for being trans. Yeah, transphobia doesn't exist. People are universally supportive of being trans these days. That's been my experience.
On in life, it's an erotic thing for them. It's sort of a fetish almost.
Yeah.
Source? Evidence?
I mean, you can see that if you look. If you actually look at the, you know, the...
Oh, here we go. She's actually gonna back up the claim that for trans people it's just a kink.
The chat rooms and the Reddit, the subreddits and so on, clearly it is. I mean, they're not, you know, they're not dressing in dowdy women's clothes. They're not heading, you know, they're not putting on t-shirt and jeans and heading out to, you know, pick up the shopping and...
Yes, they are. Well, has she never heard of like me wearing the boy motor hoodie to go out and like not be seen and observed? She's not even reading the trans forum. She doesn't even know about the dysphoria hoodie. Obviously, people talk about going out in jeans and the dysphoria hoodie. She doesn't even know trans culture.
It's very sexualized.
How?
It's all about heels and lipstick and, you know... Yeah.
That's all she has? It's about heels and lipstick? What? Being trans is a fetish because trans women wear heels and lipstick? Has she ever heard of like a cis woman wearing heels and lipstick? Is that a fetish? That's literally the only example she can point to. She doesn't know about the dysphoria hoodie, and she thinks that all trans people talk about is heels and lipstick. I don't even, I've been on the trans subreddits for a while. If you were gonna talk about like trans people and like how they act sexualized, like you would talk about like anime cat girls, not like heels and lipstick. She doesn't even understand trans culture. The whole anime cat girl thing, that tends to just be like an autistic girl thing, and it's not always like a sexualized thing. She doesn't even know trans culture. Like, it's very clear.
I mean, it's just quite obvious once you stop thinking that it's an identity and start thinking like, what's your motivation here, mate?
It's just quite obvious when you stop thinking it's an identity and start thinking that it's a fetish. Oh my goodness.